Today's episode, I'm really excited to have Chris Treble, a friend. I first met him 19 years ago in Silicon Valley. I stayed with him as a high school student. He's been a mentor and became a good friend of mine for more than half of my life. Chris comes from a modest working family background, grew up in the UK during World War II, managed to make it to the US. This was a bumpy ride. First time he went, he screwed up in college. He had to come back as a 20-year-old, work at Selfridges in London. And I think you'll enjoy this one. And without, giving too much away, somehow he managed to get into Stanford Business School, established himself as a real estate entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, did over $1 billion in real estate deals, made a lot of money, lost a ton of money, almost all of it in 08, 09. But he's still running and he came back from it. That's really inspiring to me. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And there's going to be, I think, a lot of things around how to approach business, how to take opportunities, how to identify opportunities, what's the right mind or what's the mindset to find opportunities and to turn them into business. There's a couple of details like when he got his first loan from a bank or how he met his first business partner. And sometimes you just got to believe in yourself. And without further ado, enjoy this episode. So maybe let's really start with, who are you is such a general question, but you're 85 now, you've built companies, you've, I think, made a lot of money, you've, I think, lost a lot of money, you've recouped a lot of money. So from the financial side, but there's way more to you than that. But maybe we can start with, because I really, as someone who went to the US as a 16-year-old and you helped me be able to do that, you're from the UK, right? So how does someone who's born in the UK, you used to work at Selfridges? Do I remember correctly, as a young teenager? Was this in the 50s or when was this?
Okay, so the Selfridges story is basically that my father worked there. He worked there as a young man before the Second World War. He came back after the Second World War. I do not know the full story. He wanted to, I think, actually get a different job and do something that was perhaps more remunerative or more interesting to him, still sales, but he was seeing himself as maybe going out into the world doing, what should we say, industrial sales, or larger scale sales than just being in a retail store, okay? But apparently that didn't happen. So he wound up being back at Selfridges, where he'd worked before the war, and he worked there for the rest of his life, right? So when I went back to the UK with my tail between my legs after, my initial failure being here in the US. So I went back in 1960, and he helped me get a job at Selfridges. And I would travel up on the train with him from Guildford every day and take the tube from Waterloo over to Oxford, all that stuff. Okay, on and on. It was sort of okay, but it's pretty, what should I say? It's pretty demeaning to have your father get you a job and be going to work with him. It wasn't, he was a lovely man. And so there we were. Yeah, you're right. It was Selfridges. But Selfridges had a big history for me, because one of the big things in my life was by then I was, 1960, I'm 20, right? So I'm a young man then. But when I was 12, one of the biggest events in my life I remember was watching the coronation parade for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, okay, from the windows of Selfridges in 1952, when we still had food rationing and stuff. And it was like a huge party there. I'd never seen so much food in my life. There was all this food. And we were living on kind of, we weren't starving, but it was pretty minimal. And then I can remember sitting up in the windows. You'd never see a parade like it again in the world. There were Indian troops in these kind of crazy uniforms. There was the Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, sitting in his open carriage with the rain pouring down on him. There was the Queen of Tonga. There was the state coach with Elizabeth II, this fantastic, huge gold contraption being hauled down the street. So yeah, wow, I remember that just being very fantastic as a kid. So that's sort of like almost the brackets of my life there. I was there when Elizabeth gets crowned, and I'm here after she's dead, right? So the whole reign is there in my yeah. Okay, so there you go. I rattle on. But you wanted to talk about working at some.
That's an amazing story, like the details with the coronation and all of that food, right? That's also something I noticed. Like, I always had more than enough food, like actually way too much food sometimes. So, like, sometimes when I read about people not having enough food, I'm like, wow, fuck, that's actually, knock on wood, not something I had a problem with. And I remember my grandfather telling me during World War II, there was like food rationing and you had like stems. So it was like, they were really, really hungry.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't hungry. I think we had enough, but there was never more than enough. There was never anything left over. You always ate absolutely everything that was put before you. And mainly for the English, which is probably true for the Germans too. It was, basically because resources were limited, like there weren't bananas and there weren't oranges.
Yeah.
You got an orange in your Christmas stocking, and that was it was a treat to have an orange. You know what I mean? Things like that.
You shared that you worked at Selfridges when you were 20. Your dad helped you get that job. In hindsight, you say that's not the coolest way to get a job. Did you at the time already feel like that's not a good setup, or you were just grateful to have a job? Or was it a bit like, no, I cannot, like, why am I dependent on my dad to give me this job or help me get that job?
Yeah, I just think it was more that I knew it was what I had to do, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. My dad was very loving to me, so I didn't resent that, but it was like, I guess I was sort of a discontented and maybe unhappy person, and he seemed very squared away and comfortable with himself, with his life, those kinds of things. And I had this itch about me, right? I don't know if you've had that. It's like, I'm not even sure I totally knew what it was that I needed to do or had to do or why I was feeling like that. But it was just like, no, this is not, I'm in a bad place, right?
And so you grew up in the UK, experienced parts of World War II, right? Like as a very young child.
Yeah.
When was the first time you went to the US? Was that before Selfridges or had you already?
Yeah, I first went to the US when I was 18.
So why, like you told, right? You were relatively modest upbringing in terms of financial resources, right? Like it wasn't typical, I assume, right after World War II for 18-year-olds to go to the US. Like how did that happen? Why did you even want to go?
I had a wonderful aunt. Her name was Mary. Aunt Mary was her name. Aunt Mary, I'll use the old term language. I don't even know if you have this in German, but Aunt Mary was a spinster. Okay.
What's that?
Spinster is a lady who was never married. Okay. An unmarried woman. They had a specific name for unmarried women, if you can imagine that. I don't imagine we'd use that today, but it's probably a term of English is dying out, right? But God, she was an amazing woman. Okay. So basically, the reason she was a spinster, her fiance had been killed in the Boer War in Africa. So that was around 1900. So she'd lost her fiance. She never got married after that. You don't ask people these things. He must have been the love of her life. You know what I mean? She never found anybody else. So what an extraordinary story. I don't know the story other than that single thing about it. Okay. So then she wound up, because most young women of modest means in England wound up being servants. So she was a servant. But she went to the USA. She became a servant at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. I don't know exactly how long she was there, but she made some American friends or what have you, okay? So after she came back. God only knows why she came back to England. She came back. She lived in England through the Second World War. Why she didn't stay in the U.S. for the second, I can't tell you, but she came back. So she lived in a little room in Chelsea, which is now a pretty fashionable part of London. But she lived on a street, Redburn Street, where my grandparents had originally lived. I don't know if they ever owned the house or if they were tenants in it. Big old townhouse. And so this aunt had then moved back in there. She had a little room that was probably 2 or 3 meters one way and 3 meters the other way, right? So it's called a bed sitting room. It had a bed in it. It had a gas stove in it. It had a sink in it. And she lived in that. And so you had the toilet down the hall, the bathroom down the hall, shared with the other tenants in the house. Okay. And believe it or not, Dennis, back then, the toilet, we didn't even have toilet paper. We had ripped up newspaper for toilet paper. That's what was hanging on a hook in the bathroom, right? That's what, okay. So kind of interesting. So anyway, so she was this very nice lady, and she would take me, my dad, when he'd go to work, this is when I'm 11, 12, whatever, young kid, and he'd go up to London for the day to work, and she would meet us at either his work or the train station, something like that. She would take me touring around the museums of London and the sights of London, okay? Then we would go back to her little bed sitting room, and we would have tea, and tea would consist of something coming out of the care packages that she would get from her old friends in the USA. So out would come a tin, as we call it in England, a can, they call it in the US, of Spam. Do you know what Spam is?
Yeah, I saw that in Okinawa, which is a former US sort of military base in Japan. And there was a lot of t-shirts with Spam. I don't know exactly what it is, but it looked like canned food.
Yes, it's canned food. It's canned meat. It's leftover bits of pork that have been ground up and put in a sort of container, right? So basically, this thing was fantastic to me. You can't imagine this. In England, if you had something that was in a tin, you had what was called a tin opener, which was a bladed thing that you stuck in and you dug around the edges, and it was all jagged, right? Spam came in this tin. So fucking, I can't swear on your website. So incredibly.
You can swear, it's okay.
Well, I mean, this was to me the essence of America at the time, right? The inner Spam has a slight taper on it. You should buy one time. And it had a little key attached to it that you put on a tab, and you rolled it around the edge, and the whole top just came off like magic, right? I mean, just so simple, beautiful, extraordinary. And so then out would come this wad of Spam, this block of condensed meat, or whatever you call it, and she would slice it into slices, okay, and we would have the Spam in a sandwich with an English pickle called Branston pickle, and with a cup of tea. That's what we'd have at her house. So I thought, well, America's a fantastic place. I mean, because I'd hear stories from her of her travels. So that was first thing. In the area we lived in, northwest London, out near Northolt Airport, okay, it was an American air base. So we had American servicemen living in the neighborhood. And here you are in grey, dark England, where we still have bomb sites and what have you. And you have these Americans who are there, and they're driving around in, 3-tone automobiles, right? Ivory and turquoise and black, right? Or something, right? And it's like, oh, wow, this is bloody marvelous. And then I got to before maybe 15 or 16, I started doing some babysitting for American families. And so you'd go to the house they rented, and they had a refrigerator, and they had a TV set, and they had all kinds of food and stuff, that we just didn't have, right? Including the thing I always joke about is they also had National Geographic magazines with pictures of half-naked, African women and stuff with beautiful boobs and everything. So it's like that.
And that was National Geographic?
Yeah, National Geographic. Yeah, right. That was the closest thing to soft porn we had in those days. You know what I mean?
Okay, so that was the US for you, an abundance of. So that's still true, right? In a way, although now we also have a lot of stuff in Europe in terms of resources.
Yeah. And then also there was the push side of it. I did not like this sort of, class consciousness in the UK, which has sort of faded over the years. And I don't know to what extent you had that in Germany, but we certainly had this thing that you were supposed to be sort of respectful of the system, doing what your parents did. You weren't supposed to be aspiring to, other things in life. It was about doing your duty.
That was the case in the UK in the 40s, 50s?
Yeah. Maybe towards the end of the 50s, it was starting to, change a bit, but and it has changed. I'd say it's different there today, I think, quite a lot. different. But when I was a kid, it really, I didn't like that, you know.
So you went to the US when you were 19. You told me you somehow screwed up. So you had to go
Well,
back to the UK. You got a job that your dad helped you with
right,
at Selfridges. You got to see the coronation of the Queen.
right.
You saw more food than you've ever seen before, even though you were in the US before.
No, no.
But then, yeah.
Well, yeah, no, because the coronation was in 1952. That was before I went to the US.
Okay.
It's the
Fair.
other way. Yeah. Okay.
You come back to the UK, but you kind
Yeah.
of know, okay, like, you know, I want more. I don't know exactly what it is, but I want more is kind of what I heard. And so how did you get back to the US? And then like how did you end up at Stanford, which is a business school that a lot of people want to go to, including me, and I didn't get in. So how the heck did you get in there? And like how did that happen?
Okay, so when I went back, my parents kind of killed me with kindness. They were very sweet, very lovely. I mean, I had the most amazing, beautiful parents you could ever have, right? And so they sort of killed me with kindness because there was not a single word of criticism about my failure in the US. Nothing. It was just that
Really?
I was welcomed back in and just treated as if nothing had happened. Just amazing, right? So I'm working in retail and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I don't like just sort of standing in the store waiting for people to come. So it was like, okay, what am I going to do? So frankly, I'm not a good salesperson, as you perhaps will have recognized in my conversation.
I'm not sure I agree, but continue.
Well, okay, so I worked in retail. So then I went and got a job with an American company, Remington, which no longer exists. They were, office equipment, supplies, typewriters and stuff. Okay. So I thought, okay, I've got to get out of the retail gears. And all I knew how to do or had any experience in doing was selling. So I thought, okay, that's, I didn't have any other thing to do. Right. So Remington, well, that was sort of okay, but not really that great. And then I wound up going with an English company that was making filing cabinets and stuff like that. So also office related. But with them, I got a pay increase and I got a car and stuff like that. Okay. But it was still something I wasn't particularly good at. And I was doing it and it was sort of okay, but not that great. But by then I'm starting to realize that I'm in sort of a dead end and that I've got to do something to improve my life. So I thought, okay, I've got to get back to university. Okay. So I got into what's called an external program of London University. So it was something I could do where I was based up in the Midlands of England, up in Manchester, which at that time, by the way, I don't know if you've ever been to Manchester, but Manchester still in the early 1960s was a dark, satanic city. I mean, it black
Okay.
soot, and it was in a really I don't know what would be the equivalent in German, but it was in a very declining industrial area because its whole economy had been based on textiles. So there are all these huge old cotton mills all over the town, 6 and 7 story big buildings, but all derelict because the whole industry had fallen apart, right? So then at that point, it was like, okay, I don't like this, but there was a campus there for doing University of London studies. So I signed up for that and I thought, you know what, I can do this while I'm still doing my job. That was a bit sleazy, actually, because I was working and being paid and I was sort of supposed to be working full time, but I was having to do some of my college class. So I was sort of working the two together.
Okay, but that was all in the UK, right?
I was all in the UK, right? So I got through I got a bachelor's degree in economics. Okay, there. Okay. So then I'm thinking already, well, I want to get back to the US. Okay. So I joined this association called the International Association of Students of Economics. Okay. The International Association of Students of Economics had a deal for exchanging jobs. So basically, you've got some local people to give, to set up jobs for the summer that a student could have. And then you went to this exchange where I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure how that worked. I've forgotten how that worked, but you met up somewhere. And so you took your jobs. And I thought, well, Manchester isn't a very good place. Okay. Who would want to come to Manchester as, 22-year-old or so whatever. Right? So what I did though, I think I got 5 jobs. Okay. 5 job offers from various companies. So then I went to the exchange place. And of course, again, because I had jobs in Manchester, I wasn't going to be able to get something in New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco. But I was able to exchange it for a job in Cleveland, Ohio. And Cleveland
Ooh.
was where I'd originally gone undergraduate and failed, right?
Hmm.
So I go back there. So I had a job in a believe it or not, the clothing factory. I actually learned a bit about how to cut a suit, believe it or not. Okay. But
Hmm.
I am a bit of a wimpy guy. So this place was not an air conditioned factory, and it's the summer in Cleveland. It's steaming hot. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to be able to last this out. So I thought, what the hell else can I do? So I went to a local men's clothing Jacobson's the name. I still remember the name. Said, and here I am, young English guy. I look probably a bit better than I look today. I still had hair, And so it was like I got a job there for $100 a week. This is 1965. Okay.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm not bad at this because, Americans were pretty Anglophile at the time. So in would come some dude who's looking for, a suit, a shirt, a tie, whatever. And I'm thinking I'm, hot shit. And so it's like, yeah, you want this tie to go with this suit because the color, all
So
this
you
stuff.
were like selling suits, basically?
Yes, selling clothes, yeah.
Ah. And so does that explain, because I know later on, just like quick, but I know that one of your when you had your real estate business, you told me one of your things was to have really nice tailor-made
Yeah,
suits from London. Like,
yeah.
was that maybe related to having sold these, or I don't think you sold
No, I
those
think
kind of suits, but
I had that from even my school days because one of my pals who did cartoons, I don't know if I got the cartoon anymore, but he did a cartoon of me talking about shirts that had a particular kind of cotton and had to be the right cotton, the right length of cotton thread or something like that. So
yeah.
I was always a bit into,
So now you're
then
making $100 a week in
someone, okay,
Ohio
in
selling
Ohio.
suits. So how do
Okay.
you get from selling suits and $100 a week to Stanford Business School?
So that was sort of just kind of keeping things alive there.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I thought, well, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing my undergraduate degree, I'm in this sales job, and I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. The only way I'm going to get up in life is by getting a better education. I'm not going to
Hmm.
be a doctor or a lawyer. I'm not going to be an accountant or anything. It's like, okay, so what am I going to do? Oh, okay, so I need to get a business degree. That's why somehow I just came to that. It's like I got to get in business. And so here you are living in England in the mid 60s, right? And it's not like now, but so because you'd have a lot more ability perhaps to do research and stuff. But I thought, okay, here we go. I know Harvard, I know Stanford, because these are all international. Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Chicago, and I think UCLA or something like
Yeah.
that. So 5. So I applied to all 5 of them. One of them I got accepted at was Stanford. I didn't get accepted at Harvard. I remember that. And maybe I got accepted at one other place. And maybe it's fortunate I didn't, because like Chicago would be a lot more mathematically oriented. My math wasn't great. So I got an acceptance there at Stanford. And basically, I think it was sort of luck. They'd had a new dean who'd come in a couple of years or a year or two before, Ernie Arbuckle. And Arbuckle wanted to make the school a lot more what it is today, with basically having research into, how various business processes work, whether it was computational or organizational behavior, whatever, those kind of things.
Hmm.
And he wanted to really sort of upgrade the place. So basically, they'd had this thrust to make it more international. And I think maybe perhaps a lot of people didn't know about that at the time the way they do today, because
Hmm.
Dennis, I am a sort of between B and C student. I was definitely in the middle of everything. I was not. Well, I was not.
It was in the middle of
Well,
everything.
yeah. So some of it was just right.
Yeah.
Um, and then, of course, even in those days, it was a lot less expensive than today, but they had to have money. And somebody actually, uh, Oh God, I shouldn't tell you this, but
Now
here we
it
go.
gets interesting.
That's interesting. I had an affair with a woman. Okay,
We're recording this, right? I hope it's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, don't give any names. Okay, no names. Uh, um, um, then she got married. Okay, I mean, the affair came right. She got married. So the guy she got married to was fairly well off, and well, they lent me. I repaid them actually. They lent me the money to go to school. Okay,
did he know about your arrangement?
he did. I mean, it was after me, right? And so,
Okay.
so these are the strange things of
Do you
life, right? And,
remember like how much tuition it was back then?
oh God, it was like 3,000 or 3,500 a year, something like that, right? And
Okay,
by
but
the
like if you made like $100 a week, then that's a lot of
way,
money, right?
yeah, you could. Yeah, yeah. It was. I mean, it was substantial, but it was. I think relative to income and resources, it was still a lot less than today. So, for example, I remember that was that, and then they didn't have a lot of on-campus housing for graduate students. They
Mhm.
had apparently arranged to rent some apartments in a local apartment building, and
Mhm.
so there was three guys, myself and two other guys, in a
Right.
two-bedroom apartment, not a three-bedroom apartment. So it was sort of weird. We gave the one bedroom to the guy who was getting laid, so he had that. And so the other two guys, we shared a place, right? So, but it was like was it? I think it was $180 a month. So each of us in Palo Alto, right off Embarcadero Road, accommodation was $60 a month. Okay, well, I mean, so different times, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's like very central in Palo Alto, which is where Silicon Valley and Stanford is, right? So today, much more expensive.
And by the way, fun enough again, not to name a name, but I was sort of shocked here the other day talking to one of the people who we are mentoring, whose name you all know,
Yeah.
whose internship is paying him $4,000 a month
Ooh,
and a
really? That's a lot.
and a $1,500 a month housing allowance.
Both?
But, yeah, the two. So that's
That's
$5,500 a month.
that's amazing.
Now, I mean, San Francisco's a horribly expensive place to live, right? But it's
Yeah.
like I'm thinking, oh, I mean, that's pretty. It's just
Yeah, that's really good. That's better than what I got at Bain, and I thought Bain was already amazing as an intern. Okay, cool, cool. So now you're going to Stanford, and then like, how did you get into entrepreneurship? Like, because you didn't have any like
yeah.
entrepreneur. Like, did you know any entrepreneurs? Like, your dad
Well,
wasn't, right? Like, no.
not nobody in the family. We came from a very pedestrian, family, working class family. My grandfather was a miner, and my other
Hmm.
grandfather was a tailor, right? So,
Hmm.
just working people, no exposure at all to any of that sort of
Hmm.
stuff. Okay, and so Stanford had a little bit of entrepreneurial stuff that was sort of beginning, but not really heavily the way it is today, right?
Hmm.
Most people, when they left, either went into, sort of finance or the big corporations, whatever, IBM's, GE, stuff like that. I went with, and again, because I think I was sort of a somewhat mediocre student. I wasn't, I mean, I was okay, but I wasn't, a high flying person. So I didn't get an offer from Goldman Sachs or anything like that, right? I mean, I got sort of prosaic offers, like with accounting companies and with and the one I took was the one with not an accounting company. I took this job with Chrysler Corporation. Okay, and I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty cool because at that age, I was still interested in vehicles, and I knew that Chrysler had an English subsidiary right at the time, and I thought, well,
Hmm.
okay, that could also be cool because wow, I could wind up going to England with an American company, an American salary, and living at English economic scale. So that was something that was in my time,
Arbitrage.
right? Arbitrage. Yeah. And I got married to Nancy while I was in business school. So it was
Hmm.
like, okay, we're married and, we're going to be having a family. And so also all this stuff was there. Okay. So when Nancy and I got married, I said, "Hey, I'm going to be, a 9 to 5 guy, a real good family guy." I said, I'm focused on having a good career and we have a good life, kind of thing, but nothing entrepreneurial there. So then I go to
Uh-huh.
Christ, and I found there were a few things that I liked and didn't like. So, for example, I had a stint in their, I don't know if I can call it accounting department. Well, I did. I spent some time going out auditing dealerships, and automobile dealers at the time, they were all bloody crooks. I mean, just
Hmm.
almost without exception, you'd have to audit them because you'd be shipping them cars, and then they would tell you that the car was on their books on their lot when they'd actually sold it already, got the money from the customer, but they still had the loan with you and they hadn't paid
Yeah.
it off. All these kind of things, right? So I didn't like that too much. I wound up then with a stint at their real estate subsidiary. It was actually very innovative at the time because it was the first company, I think, in the world to come up with the notion of having their dealers identified by brand. It was an early branding thing, okay? They came up with a consistent livery for every dealer to have, okay? And that was the first time that happened. Before that, dealers just built whatever they built, okay? They brought this guy in who was a real estate guy as opposed to, somebody who'd grown up in the automobile business. His name
Uh-huh.
was Ed Homer, and he'd been with a shopping center company. Okay.
Hmm.
And so he was president of the subsidiary. And somehow, I don't know whether he'd persuaded them or whatever, but we had this program that was called Diversified Real Estate. And you're thinking, well, why the hell would that be? So Ed Homer, he was like, as they refer to, the kid in the candy store. The company had no investment strategy at all, other than it was his plaything. So they had the most bizarre diversified portfolio. They had an office
Hmm.
building in Mobile, Alabama, not in New York City, but in Mobile, Alabama. They had
Okay.
student housing in Phoenix, Arizona. They had shopping centers in California. They had a ski resort in Montana. What? What? Anyway, I had a project. Okay. I had a project, and I thought, wow, this is terrific, right? I'm enjoying this. So I'm there, project manager on the project for a year, getting kind of pushed around by outside professionals who'd already been engaged, but
Hmm.
okay, enjoying it. And then at the end of the year, I go and I have my chat with Mr. Homer, and I said, "Hey, Ed, so you happy with what I've been doing?" Yeah, he says you're doing a good job. I said, so what do you see my path of progress? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, so what's next for me after project manager? How's that going to evolve? He
Hmm.
said, well, let me see. I'm the president. Uh, this man is the vice president of marketing. This man is the vice president of finance, and none of us are leaving soon.
Didum.
So it's like, okay, that means I need to get out and start looking around for things. So I get out looking for a job, and I get the job with Bank of America Realty Services, which is their newly formed entity out in California and San Francisco.
Hmm.
And it's going to be doing, investment advisory work with the real estate investment trust that they promoted.
Yeah.
So here I am in this fancy office on the 42nd floor of the Bank of America building, looking out at the Farallon Islands. Very
Hmm.
nice. Get to eat in the executive dining room, have a car that I can drive in and park in the bloody building in the center of San Francisco. I don't have to ride with the masses on the public transit or the bus or anything. So, wow, that's kind of really nice. But then I'm seeing all these people who are creating projects that I'm financing, right? It's like,
Uh-huh.
wow, this is fantastic. You go option this and you put together that and it comes up and wow, it's sort of, then you come to me and I finance it, right? So I met some of these creative people and I thought, yeah, that's sort of what I would like to be doing ultimately. And then what brought it to a head, I was there, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And then at that point, the trust that we were managing got into financial difficulties.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, I can say truly, I did not have a single project that had any difficulties.
Hmm.
All mine were all terrific. Okay. The difficulties the company had were created by a couple of people that were in the company that came from the bank. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And bank people like doing construction loans, not
Okay.
financing. Okay. And so these guys who somehow had relationships with other banks had financed several huge real estate projects that
Mm-hmm.
got into big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So the bank then sends in their what you call a hatchet man. Okay. And the hatchet man, whose name is Tom Flynn, says, Chris, I'd like to go for a cup of coffee with you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He says to me, Chris, you're seen as a customer's man. Okay. Now, what the
Okay.
hell is a customer's man? I mean, I'm supposed to be dealing with customers, bringing their projects in to be financed. So, of course, you have to present something convincingly, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think probably, I mean, I don't know exactly what it was. I would say partly because, here I am at, I'm in my mid 30s, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
people sitting on the committees approving the deals are in their 60s, 70s, they're there. So maybe uh, I alienated some of them by being so confident in what I was saying. I don't know. But in any event, I took it from this that I was no longer wanted there. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, I just need to go do something. And I was kind of ready to do it. So I just left. I was not smart. I didn't negotiate a golden parachute or anything like that. I just left. And I
Okay,
figured
so you basically got fired.
yeah, got
Mm-hmm.
fired. Or got asked to resign. How's that? We'll put
The
it that
hatchet
way.
man.
And so off I go. Okay, so that's how. So it happened in a sense, partly you'd say by desire, and partly by just events of time, right? I mean, because
Mm-hmm.
I think I probably would have gone out by myself anyway, but
Okay.
that event was the catalyst that made it
Mm-hmm.
happen. Okay. So eventually learned how to become an entrepreneur. So basically, it was like, okay, so wait a minute. Now I've left. Nancy at that point was pregnant with twins. Okay, so
Okay.
we're living in a 2-bedroom house with 2 kids and 2 more on the way. That's pretty smart. That was a really ideal time to head out in the world, right? Her
Mm-hmm.
mother at that point had also just contracted pancreatic cancer, and so we had that issue. So so it was not a good time to be doing these things. But okay, off
Mm-hmm.
it went. And it's like, okay, so now, wow, now I've got to figure out how to make some money because I didn't have really much in the way of savings or anything like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I said, okay, that means I've got to put together a deal. And I was aware of I had several opportunities out there. The first one I worked on, though, was one where I had a piece of property that another bank wanted to sell, and I had a buyer for it. And in the classic sort of mode of real estate, the way it got negotiated was that there was no room for a brokerage commission. And in California, you cannot collect a fee in a real estate transaction if you're not licensed. And I was not licensed,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it was like, okay, so what do I do now? So I said, okay, wait a minute. I've got to get my first deal done. So it doesn't matter if I get paid or not. So
Mm-hmm.
I have illustrious thing on my record of having done my first deal for no payment at all. But
Okay.
after that, things improved.
So you did your first deal without making any money on it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
It's interesting because David and I also did our first projects, which are, I guess, smaller than real estate projects without getting
Okay.
paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was for experience. Like,
Yeah.
why would you do it for free? Like, because you didn't have that license, but did it do anything else for you? Or it was more like, okay.
It meant I could say, hey, I actually can do a deal,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, like
If,
that's actually what we also found. We were like, we can actually help this person, right? Like,
yeah,
they're
yeah,
actually using what we told them and like it. So that was helpful. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And it's sort of a bit of a real life experience. It's like there's no entitlement to anything in the end, right? I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
you have to earn it in some other kind of
Yeah.
some other kind of. Okay, so basically, I wound up just initially was what I did is I figured, okay, I've got to have some income, so I did some brokerage deals, But then also, I really wanted to do retail development. That was my sort of love. And
Hmm.
so I had already established a decent relationship with a couple of retail developers. Okay. And so
Hmm.
one of those guys agreed to provide me with some backing. So I'd gone out pretty soon and optioned a couple of retail sites, and he'd put up the option money, but I was doing,
Hmm.
all the work sort of thing. So, yeah, that's how I got
Okay.
going.
And so
So
that's
why you got started going, right? That's what you do. Just
get started. No, thanks for sharing that. Like I really enjoy always these little bit serendipitous or like pretty much random things, right? But like even you saying, "Oh, I was like in the middle of everything in terms of grade, etc." But like somehow you managed to go to the US a second time, right? You
yeah,
went first time, you screwed up in college, whatever that means, but you had to go back to the UK. You go again. You work. Where did you work? Which city? In
Cleveland.
Cleveland, Ohio, right? So maybe not as bad as Manchester, but like probably also not like San Francisco, California
Yeah, not
kind of
not
thing, right? Right. I guess just by being there, that was probably less common than it is today for people to go abroad. I assume, right? So that's already like doing a little bit something unusual, I would think.
yeah. So I think and I think what that comes down to is
Hmm.
uh, in every way maybe you're just having to pick your own path in life, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot of things you don't control, so you have to be
Hmm.
willing to adapt to things, positive and negative as they happen to you. But you
Hmm.
do also have to have a sort of respect for yourself and develop a sense of your own purpose in life, right? The
Yeah.
things that bring you satisfaction and comfort, and where you feel you're making a contribution to your fellow. We kind of say fellow man, and we have to say your fellow persons, right, or
Yeah.
something. But that takes some
Yeah.
time.
So now you're out, you're doing the first real estate projects, you're even getting paid for them, I
Yeah,
hope, by this time. You have by now probably 4 children because the twins are probably born. When did things really take off? When did you know, okay, like things are working?
yeah. So I went out in 1976. I've got my office in the basement of one of the shopping centers that this shopping center guy owns. And in walks one day the guy who became my partner, Jim Sievers. Jim walks
Uh-huh.
in. Jim is working for a large real estate development in the Bay Area. It's owned by Mobil Oil Company. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he wants to sell me a piece of land for retail. I don't know how he found me, but anyway, he comes in, he's trying to sell me this. And we just wound up talking. He sort of says, "Hey, you should come join me where I am." And he's in, I called it like the 40 Thieves. He was in an office building today that we wouldn't be able to afford to go into. It was at 3000 Sand Hill Road. Okay. And it's
Ooh, that's where the
back,
venture capitalists.
yes. Okay. But in 1976, you could rent space in what was basically a cheap office building up on Sand Hill Road.
Yeah.
And
And like for people, maybe for context, this is like the Wall Street of Silicon Valley. So this is where Sequoia Capital, and
yeah,
like Andreessen Horowitz, all the big venture capital firms have their offices, right?
yeah.
Now. Or like
Okay.
in the last 20, 30 years, probably, maybe
Yeah.
40.
And 3000 is like it's a 2-story sort of garden office, but
Hmm.
really nothing super fancy at the time. Okay. And you could rent space there for $2 a square foot a month. Okay. So it was,
Uh-huh.
and so
Hmm.
basically they had like an office suite there that'd be like one of these WeWork things, except
Hmm.
just some guys had rented this amount of space, and then they put individual offices. And we had a gal who would do your typing and answer the phones, and there was a reception there. So I
Yeah.
wound up in an office in there. Then one day,
So
Jim
you
walks
did
in.
join him?
Yeah. Well, no,
Okay.
we just not in business together, just
Ah,
in the office building where there were a
gotcha.
bunch of real estate guys all doing different things. And he said, "This is where come be down here. This place you're at, sort of you're in a hole in the ground. come be where the action is, right? So I
Nice.
head
So you went where the action is.
where the action is, right? And then one day Jim walks in and says, "Hey, I've got this real estate project, a housing project in San Francisco, and I know the guy who has the option to buy it, and I know that I can sell these houses when they're built. Do you know how to finance it? Can you not? Do you know? Can you finance it?" And I said, "Well, of course I can." Okay, so there we.
Why did you say of course? Like because you just knew, or
Well, because I knew how to. That's what I'd learned at Bank of
yeah.
America. How you finance it? So I knew how to go get a bank loan. I knew how to get equity. So basically, I went to one of the guys I'd met at B of A and said, "Okay, we've got this project. It's neat here." You know, I gave him some numbers, what have you. So it was like he had. I knew he had to put up like, I don't know, 10% of the total money, maybe 15%, something like that.
Yeah.
And actually, it was funny because the first person I talked to was the guy who's the real estate developer. Okay, uh, Gerson Baker, but he had a partner whose name was Al Wilsey, and Al Wilsey was the money. Well, it had originally been the money for Gerson. Gerson had then made a lot of money in apartment development, and so Al had profited from that. So I go to Gerson. Gerson says, "Oh, I don't want to do this. Go talk to Al." Okay, so Al, and Al says, "Yeah, we'll put up the money," right? So they put up the equity money. Then
Do you
I
remember
go,
how much?
it was probably just $1 million or $2 million. I mean, not huge amount.
Just
Right?
okay.
Yeah, my first $1 million, right? Yeah. And then
Yeah.
but you have to get a bank loan too. So I go to, actually I went to Bank of America, but not to somebody I knew. Went to the local branch. A good old Irishman, Ed Sullivan was his name, in Menlo Park. And in those days, the bank manager sat up on a little podium in the corner, sort of angled out, maybe a foot off the ground, something like that, you know,
Yeah.
and looking out at the tellers across the other side of the room. So I'm in there for a loan. I think the loan we were looking for was, I don't know, it was maybe $4 or $5 million. Again, it wasn't huge, right? It was maybe 5 million of loan and $1 million of equity, something like that. So I go up, I talk with him. He asked me a few questions about the project, the little package I've given him. And then he looks at me and he says, because I remember that it's just crazy. I remember these funny things. He said, "Mr. Treble," he said, "I have one question for you." Oh, yeah. So please, what's that? Right. "Are you going to repay my loan?" Okay. So, well, I'm not going to say I'm not sure or that depends. I just, well, yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
And were you certain, or were you like, well, I don't know? It's like
Well, I'm sufficiently arrogant that I probably was pretty certain, because it's like, yeah, I think part of it, you don't know what you don't know. We've got this a project which is to build 20 houses, 20 townhouses with a view over San Francisco and up over the Oakland Bay Bridge. So we think it's pretty nice. I suppose if we'd gone into a serious economic downturn where sales weren't happening, you could have wound up but that sold pretty well. So that was the first place where I made any money, and we didn't make, I forget what it was, but we made sort of probably 2x for the investor, maybe 3x, and so we probably pulled out, between the three of us, I think we pulled out something like maybe $1 million of profit and got split 3 ways, right? Something like
nice.
after paying.
300K.
Yeah, the investor probably got $1 million, right? I mean, got his $1 million back and $1 million, and we probably got $1 million that was split 3 ways, something like that.
So what did you do like that day when money hit the bank account?
Don't even remember. Dennis, I think it's almost like what should we say? You do a job, and when you get paid the money, it's like getting a grade, right?
Yeah.
To me,
but like now I get it, right? Because you've done hundreds of millions of real estate things, but like this was the first project that really paid off well, right? So I thought maybe you do remember.
Now you're talking about the first time you get laid, right? You remember that?
Yeah, exactly.
so that's true. No, but I think for me there was always more excitement when you got the deal put together to start.
Yeah.
That was always
yeah.
It was always
100%, right? Then like money should come eventually, but it's like, okay, we're gonna do it. Like I feel like I have the same thing in a way. Even sometimes before it gets started, it's like, okay, things are coming together. It's not 100% clear that it will work, and then it does work.
And I think that's because it's the creative process is actually putting the thing together. The doing of it is actually the implementing or the execution. I think we know from sort of the way adrenaline stuff works that basically your adrenaline builds up not from getting the deal done, but from the excitement and stuff of getting it to the point of being done, right? Because I think your your dopamine levels sort of drop off at the actual point of just getting it done. They sort of peak slightly before you, something like that. Yeah.
So Chris, like we've met in 2006, right? So 19 years ago. I did not realize what a ridiculous place we initially met. I'm not sure. Do you remember where we first met?
Well, I remember how we met, which was through Ken.
So I'm pretty sure that we met. So Ken was my mentor who knew my uncle. That's how I got to Silicon Valley first time as a 16-year-old. And then it was 4th of July, which is this big celebration in the US, Independence Day. And Ken invited me to this, what is it called? Menlo Park Polo Club, right? Where they play polo. Out of all the places. And I'm like 16 years old. I don't have a clue. Like horses. I mean, who gives a shit? I didn't even know what a ridiculously fancy thing that is. But I think that's where we met initially when I was spending the summer there.
Yeah. Could well be. I mean, we had a lot of fun together. I mean, that's mainly what I remember you coming into my life. And as you know, also, it was very therapeutic for me at the time because Nancy was already, ill. So it was really nice in that way. The Menlo Park Polo Club I haven't been to in years. I was never particularly into that. I mean, for me, I sort of when we made money and had money, I mean, I always liked nice things. I like being in nice places, but I wasn't ever into particularly society stuff,
So let's so then we do that, right? We kind of like maybe go back. You did that first deal, right? $300K in the bank account. That was the first deal you did with that business partner. Was that the partnership where you got a third person involved that worked really well?
No, that was how we sort of started. Okay.
Yeah.
And when we started doing other housing, that's when Greg came aboard. Okay.
Do you know how much real estate projects volume you did? Was it like a couple 100 million? Was it up in the billions total volume?
I mean, over the life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? So because some of it we didn't necessarily like. The biggest project we did, the one Windermere one, which was 5,000 homes. We didn't build the homes there. Okay, that project by itself, when it was built out, was $1 billion. Okay, so probably we did something in the order of $1 billion over the years because we did several, a whole bunch of projects that were 300 and 100 and 150 and 200
millions. Yeah.
So quite a lot.
Yeah, but it's like from there, it was pretty smooth, or not smooth, but it was upwards, right? For a long time in terms of business success.
Well, we almost went completely, we almost got completely destroyed in the early 80s because,
oh, really?
Well, yeah, because you had that huge inflation going on in the 1970s, and then in came Volcker's with the Federal Reserve, and so interest went up to like over 20% on construction loans, and we were under construction with a couple of projects in the early 80s, our early projects that we started. Again, I would say I don't have very positive views of banks as a result of that, because I found that the banks, they, what should we say? The politest way I could do it is once there's the slightest bit of difficulty, they run for cover. The two projects we had, well, I'll tell you specifically, the two projects we had were both selling. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we weren't in any difficulty with them. It was just a bad time, so we were having it was harder to sell, and we maybe weren't
Mm-hmm.
getting the prices we want, but they were selling,
Mm-hmm.
and they did appraisals of the projects, and they did not require any additional equity from us, so they were still seeing they were all sound. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but the structure of construction loans with banks is, if say you have a 100-unit project, you build 3 models and you start 10 production units, and they say, okay, once you're under contract to sell the first 5 or the first 7, okay,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes some time to build, you don't have to have actually sold them and closed them before you do the next phase, but you've got
Mm-hmm.
sort of a raw deal. You've got contracts on 5. Okay, so now you can start the next 5 or the
Yeah.
next 10. The bank we were dealing with them basically never let us start another phase until we'd actually finished, completed, and closed each prior phase. So what
Mm-hmm.
that did, that increased our cost massively. So it meant they got paid totally in full, kept totally current, but they used up all our equity. So they caused us to lose money. Okay. So what we
Mm-hmm.
had to do was we then had 2 retail sites that we were planning to develop. We sold those to other developers to get enough cash to keep
Mm-hmm.
ourselves alive. Okay. So that lasted us like from 82, 83, something like that, or maybe 81, 82. And then in 83, we came out of this sort of recession, and the next project we had underway just sort of took off like a rocket. So we wound up then being um, strongly in residential real estate rather than retail, because we sold our
Mm-hmm.
retail. We didn't, so that was kind of sad for me, because the retail is what I really like. That was our long-term deal. So yeah, there were definite ups and downs. And so a lot of it is, there's just a lot of luck and circumstance. So for example, we're taking off in 83, okay, and then we wind up with very good fortune with a financial partner, which was a company, a savings and loan, that
Mm-hmm.
actually came to us through. I didn't find them. This thing. So I'm supposed to be finance.
Yeah.
Jim's supposed to be marketing and getting the land
So
projects.
those are your business partners, right?
Yeah, and Greg's supposed to be doing the construction. Well,
Yeah.
okay, so Greg had been in college with a guy who'd gone with this savings and loan company, okay?
Uh-huh.
And they were looking to have a partner in the Bay Area who
Mm-hmm.
they could invest with and do things. So we became their exclusive partner, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They made the best deal we ever had. They wound up putting up 100% of the money,
Ooh.
not 100% of the money, and they owned the projects, so they had all the liability on them. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a contract that gave us the right to half of the profits.
Oh.
So it was a miracle, kind of thing. Not a miracle. It was better than any other deal we ever had. Okay, and
Uh-huh.
so they came in at around that, maybe not on that first project, but sometime then. So that was a good thing. But then, sadly, because of what happened in the savings and loan industry, not with this particular company, because it's a very
Mm-hmm.
solid company, but then that whole regulation around their activities got changed to where it was no longer profitable for them to be investing with us, even though we
Mm-hmm.
were producing a huge amount of profit for them. Okay, so it
Mm-hmm.
was sort of, that was a great thing when it happened, very sad when it ended, but totally beyond our control, right? So you had that kind of thing, and then we had another project where we had another savings and loan that was financing it, and we'd gone into it, we'd sold about, I don't know, about 25% of it, and for some reason they wanted to be out and booking their profit. They didn't want to stay in for the whole thing. Okay, so we made them a deal to buy them out. $1 million. Okay, what's what they
for
wanted.
$1 million?
No, several million. It was like
Yeah.
5 million. So,
Okay.
okay, like that. That's what they were happy with. So paid off their loan and their 5 million. And another bank financed 100% of that for us, so we didn't have to come up with the 5 million. And
Mm-hmm.
that project ultimately made 50 million, of which the original savings and loan would have had half. Okay, but they decided they wanted out. Right. So it's like,
So
oh,
you
okay,
got 50 million in that deal?
yeah.
Nice.
So, but it wasn't through our smartness or our conniving. That's what they wanted, right? And I mean, okay, we were a bit smart because we figured we didn't have to put up the 5 million. We knew how to get the 5
Yeah.
million from somewhere else. We had to structure that deal, but it was still something that came up that was an opportunity that we had not
Yeah.
conceived of getting, right. So I think there's a lot of that in life that you have to recognize. I mean, okay, some of it is because, yeah, you're working hard and you're being engaged and all those things. Otherwise, you
Hmm.
wouldn't have the opportunity to present itself. But
Hmm.
the opportunity that you get doesn't necessarily come about as a direct result of your
Yeah.
work and effort, because sometimes it's the reverse. Sometimes, and I'm sure you've seen this with your stuff, you can be putting forth a huge amount of effort and the customer isn't appreciative, and you don't get appropriately rewarded, right? That happens
Yeah.
as well as the other way. So sometimes
Yeah.
positive, negative.
100%. I didn't like know that it was two times that you almost got wiped out, right? Because then fast forward, this was like 2007 or something, right? And
Yeah.
you were like, I don't know, 100 million or something, like, and then you told me with the financial crisis, you broke your rules, right? Your three golden rules. You broke
Yeah.
one of them or two of them, and you got in trouble.
Yeah. Worse trouble. Yeah. Real trouble.
So this is
Yeah.
even like, it's not that long ago, right? This is like 17 years ago. So you were like 68 or something, where most people go in retirement.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's not a good timing, I suppose.
No, it wasn't. And it's funny, you know, you look at when people say they take responsibility. It's a very interesting uh, thing, because what does it mean to take responsibility? I can give you actually a good German example with one of the most interesting people I find is Albert Speer, right? Who, you know, I've talked to previously. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what an amazing person, amazing career, even with this affiliation with the Nazis, which is to his detriment. But you look at him, his career, and how he survived. And of course, one of the reasons he didn't get executed along with other Nazis was he took some level of responsibility, but it's not clear he ever took individual responsibility as opposed to collective responsibility, right? Or
Hmm.
so there's all this sort of strange stuff about responsibility. But and
Hmm.
I think you face that at every level. So, for example, for me, I've always had a lot of friends who say to me, "Oh, you couldn't see it coming, and it was you couldn't avoid it, etc." Well, I mean,
Hmm.
I don't think that's totally true, and that's why I've used the example with you, because I broke some of my rules, and I think if I
Hmm.
hadn't broke those rules, that wouldn't have happened. Okay,
So those rules are like,
so the one rule is, never guarantee anything, right? Because you just
exactly.
predict the future.
And so
Uh,
you did guarantee, like, you use some of your private real estate or what have you to guarantee loans to then get more volume for other deals, right? Before the
yes,
crisis. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yes. So guarantees. I mean, there's only one thing worse than a guarantee, and that's an indemnity, which is even more extensive. But yes, so guarantees, I think, are a serious problem. So that was a part of the difficult, because if you haven't guaranteed something, there is more onus on the counterparties to negotiate with you, right? I
Hmm.
mean, you're totally at their mercy. So there's that. The second one I would say is there's always another deal. So
Yeah.
again, for me, it was like I just looked at it wrongly, and we took on projects that we really didn't. We just pushed too hard to make certain projects seem like they worked, and we shouldn't have done that.
Uh-huh.
Now you say I had three rules. I'm not sure what the third.
Maybe it's just two, because those are the two that I remember. There's always another deal, never guarantee anything. So I'm sorry, like,
Yeah, yeah,
so, but yeah, those are the two, and
yeah.
so you broke those, right? And then, like, basically your friends from the banks. So it's not just. I thought it's the 2007, 8, or 9, 7, 8, 2008,
Yeah, just
roughly.
a bank that we'd taken on to finance a
Suddenly,
project.
people you knew were gone, right? Like new counterparts and
Well,
stuff.
yeah, that was the new counterpart. East Party, I would say, the people who financed a couple of the projects that we wound up with our existing financial resources with banks being, fully utilized, and so we needed a new banker. We came up with
Yeah.
these guys. They just said, "Hey, guarantee the first couple of deals till we get to
Yeah.
know you better." And okay, and so yeah, stupidly I did that. That's totally on me. The only then sort of exceptions I have to that are I think again fall into the, shall we say, somewhat into the luck category,
Mm-hmm.
is that I, from my own education and background and my contacts, I did not have contacts into the appropriate um, resources to be able to say hedge against something that I saw coming. Because I did actually see, I was aware we were going to come up with another recession, and
Mm-hmm.
I had been able to deal with previous recessions that we'd had
Mm-hmm.
one way or another, because it wasn't just the 1981-82 thing. There was another one in like the mid 80s and the early, there was several, because we
Mm-hmm.
have cyclical markets, so you have to learn to deal with that. And typically I had been able to deal with it, but this one coming up, I at least had the conception that it was going to be more severe than previous ones, maybe at the
Mm-hmm.
level of the 1980s, early 1980s again, or something worse even. I did not, I would say I didn't accurately conceive of the length of time it would go on for, but I did conceive of the depth that it would go to, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know how to hedge it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I think even hedging itself is questionable, because we know there's that guy Green who wrote The Big Short, right? Who did hedge that and was
Mm-hmm.
successful with his hedge. Although when you read his book, he's very clear that he came within a couple of months of actually losing that bet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's always uncertainty. There's never 100% ability to hedge anything, right? You can diminish the risk or improve the coverage of the risk or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that ability, either from ignorance or some of it, I might say, was also a function of maybe the amount of effort I put into it, because at that time, again, I was going through the thing with Nancy where she was chronically ill in a horrible way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also had a tax audit that came up. So all those things happened at the same time. And again,
Mm-hmm.
was this unpredictability, luck about that. So you can argue that I should have done a better job of handling it, but
Okay, but
well,
like you really then went down by like 95%,
yeah, exactly. I'd say.
but you
And
kept going.
I kept on. So what do? When so it's like, okay, you go down. Dennis, I like nice things. I had some art. I had some good furniture, various things like that. So basically, I sold those piece at a time and lived off that, and then tried to get my head back into, doing things to build the net worth and the value again. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, again, I mean, I wound up, because the thing went on for longer than I thought. I just kept. You were talking about something earlier, not perseverance, but you were talking about
Persistence.
persistence. Similar thing, persistence, perseverance. I mean, I just persisted in doing my own stupid stuff. I kept going at, looking at new things and doing some new things. And really, in what, 2009, 10, 11, 12, they weren't particularly successful, because things didn't really come back till quite a bit. Yeah, you got to come up with some way of doing. Now you could say, well, okay, you need to learn from what went wrong and do something different. But
Mm-hmm.
the message to me wasn't to do something different. It was literally that you had to find ways to keep going at what you knew how to do, because the way that you create value doesn't change. I mean, it's just you have to look for opportunities, right? And then
Yeah.
you have to adapt to changing markets. It's true, but the way that you approach a market doesn't change, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's right,
That's
something like that.
interesting. So you're saying it wasn't really like learning and like, oh, I do everything differently. It's more like, well, I'll just keep at it and hopefully the market conditions come back. But like what I fundamentally done is still working. It's just new market environment in a way.
Well, it's not hopefully the market comes back, because I think the markets, I mean, I'd say markets change.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to be examining what the new market is, right? Maybe sometimes it's waiting for a market to return. but for example, I'd say, like, if I move up to what I'm doing today, right,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to back then, I did realize I couldn't get back into, and I didn't particularly want to get back into building a whole residential building company, because I didn't particularly, what you would say, enjoy running a company. I find, company with a lot of employees is not my thing, right? Uh, so I started looking at different stuff, right? So,
Yeah.
for example, getting back into the retail, as you know, we're doing now.
Yeah.
So, we've got, okay, so you look at this old defunct Sears store, which is a dead thing.
So basically, you look for ways to generate wealth without having a big company with lots of employees that you need to manage.
Yeah, and so it's partly that. Okay, but on the other hand, I mean, the market there. The point I'm making with the Sears thing is,
Yeah.
it's, although it was built as a department store, there you wouldn't go talk to existing department store companies in the U.S. and say, "Do you want to be in this building?" Because
Yeah.
they're all dealing with having too much real estate anyway, and so you've got to say, does this building have a reimagined use? So it's a different. I mean, it's a parallel. It is retail still, right? But it's a reimagined, different kind of
Yeah.
real estate use. Okay, so there's that, and then for me also, as I told you, with doing these investment deals that I've been doing over the years,
Mm-hmm.
in the venture capital stuff, I then did get very interested in the biopharma area, and so have now got significant investment there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking now, at my age, the one I'm working on, which I've told you about, the Oxy
Mm-hmm.
company, it's like, once we get that going, I don't think I'm going to want to do another Oxy, okay,
Mm-hmm.
after this one. Okay, I'm sort of content with that one. I will continue doing the, investing in what I'm calling sort of passive active. I'm not sort of particularly a stock market guy where I want to have a lot of mutual fund stuff. I like investing in startups at various levels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that intellectually engaging, and also sort of at other levels, I find. Sort of moving towards the future. And this even relates into the mentorship thing you talked about. I mean, I find
Yeah.
engaging with young people who are inventing things is more interesting to me than being in something that's already all there established. So I like that sort of end of things. So I'll continue doing that. And then being in the real estate stuff. And obviously, you have to have a certain amount of passive investing just to be whatever secure.
Yeah.
Theoretically, anyway.
So thanks for sharing, Chris. I really enjoyed. I already look forward. My fiance usually doesn't listen to our podcast, but she asked me to send her your episodes. So same for my
Oh,
cousin, I think. Shout out to Philip and Henry. So this is part number 1, and we'll record a part number 2 where we specifically talk about mentorship, because that's how we got to know each other. You were my mentor. Now I think we're friends. I'm happy to call you a friend, but like, still, there's some of that going on, and I think this is super interesting. So I look forward to do that in part 2. But now people at least know a little bit where you're coming from, which I think is quite exciting.
And then you're going to do some mentoring for me.
Reverse mentoring.
Well,
So thanks, Chris.
right.
Thanks so much for listening. Please let us know whether you also, I hope you enjoy these English episodes, but we just don't want to limit ourselves to German language only. So I hope you enjoyed this. Chris will come back and share a little bit around mentorship, how we've worked together, how to find a mentor, how to grow as a mentor, how to grow as a mentee, reverse mentoring, all those things that I think are really valuable that I learned when I went to Silicon Valley as a 16-year-old. And Chris has been, very helpful, very generous along my journey. Actually, he helped a bunch of young people, and I think it's part of his recipe to stay young. So I very much look forward to part 2 of this. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate all the feedback. Like, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. Give us 5 stars on iTunes or Spotify or both. and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And thanks for tuning in. Meine erste Million. Auf Wiederhören.